hereby call to order the Roseville Economic Development Authority meeting for Monday, November 6th, 2023. Mr. Executive Director, would you call the roll, please?
Member Strawn.
Here.
Member Etten.
Present.
Member Schroeder.
Here.
Member Groff.
Here.
President Rowe.
Here. And with us at the dais for the start of our EDA meeting is our EDA attorney, Gina Fiorini, who's on my right at the end. We also have City Manager Pat Trudgeon on my left at the other end of the dais. He is the City Manager and the Executive Director of the EDA. That's how we'll be treating him tonight for this part of the meeting.
Wow.
With that, we also have other staff and folks who will be participating in the meeting, and they'll be introduced as agenda items come up. I would remind folks, if you've got a cell phone, to silence it or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt the meeting. We will be, as we usually do with the EDA meetings happening before the council meeting, we'll forego the public comment section of the EDA agenda and do that at the beginning of the council meeting, but we'll try not to make you wait too long through the EDA meeting, just because we've just got a few items on the agenda this evening. I also want to remind folks that if you need a copy of any of the meeting materials, that is available in the back of the chambers in the large binder under the clock. There's one copy for members of the public, and then also there's additional copies that you can have of the agenda to know what the agenda is this evening if you need that. That's also in the same location. There's also information there about how to participate in a council meeting and other things, hopefully still there. It was last time I checked. That could be helpful for you as well. With that, then, we'll ask folks to stand, if you're able, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our agenda this evening under the EDA meeting is to approve tonight's agenda, and I'll check with staff if there are any changes from a staff point of view this evening on the EDA.
There's no changes.
All right.
Mr. President.
Checking with the members of the EDA board, is there any changes needed to tonight's EDA agenda?
No.
Doesn't appear to be the case. Is there then a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Groff, seconded by Member Schroeder to approve tonight's EDA meeting agenda. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. As I noted a moment ago, we won't be doing public comment at the start of the EDA meeting, but we will do that at the beginning of the council meeting, so we can proceed right into our business items. Our first business item this evening under the EDA agenda is item 5A, which is to consider adopting a resolution to decertify tax increment financing, or TIF district, number 23, which is the Marion Street and the Brittany's Apartments District. And we have our Housing and Economic Development Coordinator, Jeannie Kelsey, with us this evening to introduce this item. Ms. Kelsey.
Thank you, President Rowe and board members. In your packet, you have for your consideration the decertifying of TIF District number 23 that was established as an affordable housing TIF district back in February of 2020 for several properties that are located on Marion Street, Larpenteur Avenue, and Woodbridge Court in order for us to attract hopefully a mission-based developer since the properties were put on the market. Several developers were interested in the properties because of the fact that we did have the affordable housing TIF district established, but unfortunately the seller at that time wanted to have highest, best, fastest close that he could possibly come upon, which many affordable housing developers need time to do due diligence and put the financing in place. We have talked to the developer, Summit Acquisition LLC, several times through correspondence of email and also phone, and they have shown no interest in having any preservation of affordable rental units in their development and not having any restrictions. So under state statute, it is required that we must decertify since we don't have a qualifying project, which was that we would have had a development agreement executed within 4 years of the establishment of this district. So you have a resolution in your packet for your consideration adopting. The one thing I do want to let you know on the budget implication is we did spend $10,000 to establish this TIF district. That can be paid for out of our administration costs for our administering of our open districts at this point. And then the other thing is that there has been increment this year. The increment is estimated to be $132,000 because only half of the year was collected so far. And once the decertification happens, the council will have back $45,000 approximately of taxes generated from the property that is not being used for TIF. So I'll stand for any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kelsey. Are there questions from the members of the EDA board? And just to clarify, you said that we had to have a project within the 4-year window, and clearly we're well ahead of that, but there doesn't seem to be any indication that between now and the actual 4-year time frame, we're going to have a project. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then the other thing is that the proceeds that we have, or that the county has received in terms of collected increment on the district, as you said, that'll go back to the taxing entities, one of which is the city.
Yep.
Also, the county and the school districts as well would receive a portion of that. And so of the approximately $45,000 that the city is estimated to get back, we can apply the $10,000 towards those costs we had, and then anything else just goes into our general fund, as I understand. Right. With that, we'll check if there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening. This is, once again, an action requested to decertify a tax increment financing district because we don't have a project that would otherwise be funded by it. As we just noted, the funds that have been collected in terms of property taxes would be reverted back to the taxing authorities, one of which is the city, the county, and the school district, among others. So that is the action that's being requested this evening. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to provide comment to the EDA board on this requested action? Seeing no one, then we'll close the opportunity for public comment on this item and proceed to consideration. We've got the resolution in the packet, and what would be in order is a motion to approve the resolution, if that's the desire.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Member Etten, seconded by Member Strawn, to approve that resolution decertifying the district as outlined in the attachment. Discussion on the motion, as the maker of the motion, Member Etten.
Appreciate that staff had created this. I thought I had to create this, and it's unfortunate it didn't work out to provide more affordability for our community. Thank you.
Seconder, Member Strawn.
I concur. It's disappointing that this happened, especially given the history of this particular set of properties having being naturally occurring affordable housing. There's nothing to keep them that way in this situation. But I appreciate the staff's attention of this and getting us in well within the guidelines. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. We have the motion before us to approve the resolution decertifying this tax increment district number 23. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that resolution is adopted. Next on our agenda, then, we have business item 5B, which is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing various amendments to various documents related to the agreement we have with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity and the Roseville Land Trust. And I'll turn it back over to Ms. Kelsey to introduce this item.
Thank you, President Rowe and board members. In your packet is for your consideration, and we also have put up on the dais the red line documents that we sent to you also today, so that you could see all the changes. And it really, we put together a PowerPoint presentation so that I can briefly go through them for you. Some of the background is that we did establish this trust partnership with Habitat back on November 8th of 2021. Program guidelines were last revised with the EDA on January 24th, 2022. Habitat has been actively acquiring properties for the partnership, and most of the homes require rehab. To date, only one closing has occurred, and that is why some of these amendments are being done, is to reflect really how the project is working, our partnership with Habitat. So the guidelines, just to give you an update on the guideline changes, we are proposing to eliminate the 25% limitation when using CDBG funds, as we found out that that is not a requirement for a land trust program by us using our CDBG. We also wanted to have inclusion of the grant funds as a funding source, since we did not have that previously. acknowledging the grant contribution totals with and without the EDA matching funds, and then elimination of a $300,000 purchase price. That does not change the amount that we are putting into each of the developments. And just to give you an idea, the first home that Habitat bought, they paid $320,000 for it. That would have exceeded the $300,000 that we were trying to keep it under. However, that did not minimize the affordability because the EDA still put only $80,000 in, but it brought the house down to a price point to sell to this first person of $224,500. So there was other funds for sources of funds, but also this program has brought attention to a financial donor in our community that is only wanting to put money into Habitat homes in Roseville. So that just gives you an idea that there's several pools of funds that come together in order to make these homes affordable. This amendment clarification also uses the grant funds. That was one thing that we wanted to put in the Master Long-Term Affordability Gap Assistance Grant Agreement, is to address that the Met Council has awarded us $300,000 to use for this program, and Ramsey County HRA grant funds is part of your, for your approval tonight, and that agreement is in for consideration. The amendments all begin on page 4. An amendment seek to clarify Habitat assumes the same responsibilities that the EDA does for these grant agreements, and it outlines the disbursement of the terms and conditions and requirements. The developer agreement is executed upon each sale of a land trust property, and that is done after a sources and uses is submitted to us, and it acknowledges Habitat has complied with the approved guidelines and clarifies that the EDA money is paid at the time the property is sold to a Habitat income qualified buyer, not at the initial acquisition of purchasing the home before rehab. So by motion, you are adopting a resolution that is providing for the approval of amended guidelines for the land trust partnership, authorizes the president and the executive director to execute the amended development agreement between EDA and Twin Cities Habitat. It authorizes the president and executive director execute the amended Master Long-Term Affordability Gap Assistance Grant Agreement, and it also authorizes the President and Executive Director to execute the Ramsey County HRA Levy Grant Agreement. So, if you have any questions.
Thank you again, Ms. Kelsey. Are there questions from members of the EDA board? Member Groff?
So this would basically bring us into compliance so we are able to get the grants that we need to complete these houses that we're working on. Also CDBG, I mean, a lot of people don't know what all these terms are, so that's Community Development Block Grants. And maybe you could just speak a little bit of what that fund is.
Yes, those are actually grant funds that we were received back from a project that paid off. It was developed as a loan, and so we still have an existing balance. It is restricted to only anybody who is 80% or less AMI, and that is why we dedicated it to this program, because all of the people that are income qualifying for purchasing a home through Habitat are less than 60% area median income.
Thanks.
Other questions for staff? And maybe just for the benefit of the public, again, the land trust and the partnership with Habitat essentially preserves the affordability of single-family homes in the community by the land trust owning the property, the underlying property, and therefore applying the income qualification essentially as long as the city, the EDA land trust owns that underlying property, and then the purchaser is buying the home itself, essentially, and that's what makes it affordable to the purchaser, because it's a lower amount, and then that purchaser is able to build equity in the home itself, and then at some point, if they move on, they can sell the home. Once again, the land trust maintains the land. They can benefit from the equity, and then once again, the affordability is maintained for future purchasers. So just for folks that may be interested in understanding that. So what this is, once again, is some requested changes because we've applied for and received grants both from Ramsey County Housing Redevelopment Authority as well as these additional grant funds, and we need to account for that in the documentation, essentially. It provides additional funding towards the city's contribution to each of these projects. To date, how many, we've got the one that's closed, how many sort of in the works are there approximately, Ms. Kelsey?
On the presentation, there was a map. We have 2 under construction. It's actually a twin home that are under construction currently on Victoria. And then there's 10 more homes that have been acquired that are in various stages of being rehabbed. We probably will have, by the end of this year, at least 2 to 3 homes that will be sold, meeting our requirement of the Ramsey County grant, because that has to be expended by March of 2024.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And that's, so it shows that it's a popular program both for people who are looking for affordable homes, but also for people who are looking to sell their homes in Roseville and have some of the benefits of selling to the land trust as opposed to on the private market. So with that, if there aren't any other questions from the board, thank you for indulging that explanatory trip. With that, if there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item, which is once again essentially modifying some of the documentation associated with the operation of this land trust on the basis of having received additional grant funds and wanting to clarify the use of some of the funds, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? All right. Seeing no one, then we'll close the opportunity for public comment. And once again, I believe all the actions that are requested can be taken by adopting the single resolution, which is an attachment in the packet. Is there a motion from the EDA board related to that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Atten. Got it. Any discussion, Councilmember Schroeder or Member Schroeder as the maker of the motion?
No, it makes sense to clean up the language.
Right, as the seconder, Member Etten?
No, thank you for the clarity on these items. Appreciate that.
Any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, then we've got the motion before us to adopt the resolution, making all the changes and authorizing all the signatures as outlined. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and those items are approved. Thank you, Ms. Kelsey. That then brings us to business item 5C, which is a discussion regarding the establishment or potential establishment in Roseville of a local housing trust fund. We have our Community Development Director, Janet Skunlock, with us this evening to introduce this topic to the EDA board. Ms. Skunlock.
Thank you, President Rowe, members of the board. A local housing trust fund is essentially a designated funding source that can help a community address a variety of housing needs. They're sometimes called affordable housing trust funds, although not every community that creates one is creating one to deal specifically with affordable housing. In Roseville's situation, I think you could call ours an affordable housing trust fund because the way the draft ordinance is presented is it would address persons or households at or below 80% area median income. Local housing trust funds can only be established by adoption of an ordinance, and we have provided a draft ordinance in your packet, which is what we're seeking feedback on tonight. The proposed ordinance is very broad. That's purposeful. We were attempting to address a variety of different projects, which preserves options for the city, given the timing that we are at with potentially creating one. However, example projects include emergency rental assistance, down payment assistance, land trust gap funding, financial support for nonprofits who are building supportive affordable housing, and then costs related to construction, acquisition, and rehab of new or existing affordable housing. The way the ordinance is drafted, we've also been very broad about the potential for funding sources, because you'll note that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has to have a designated funding source. In the draft ordinance, we've noted donations, grants, loans, appropriations, investment earnings, tax increment financing, levy funds, and local housing aid. In our specific situation, our designated funding source would be the proceeds that we anticipate receiving through the sales tax that recently was passed. We expect that first payment to come sometime before the end of the year. That is essentially why we're bringing this forward now. We want a designated, we think it's appropriate to provide a designated spot to park these sales tax proceeds, and we have estimated, or rather the state has estimated, that Roseville will receive about $400,000 annually. That number will be adjusted every year dependent on the number of cost burden households that our community has. I also want to note that through this same legislative session, I think the state designated about $5 million for local housing trust fund grants for communities who have local housing trust funds. So that is another reason we're pursuing this at that time. The EDA wouldn't actually adopt the ordinance. This would be an action that the city council would take, but given the EDA is tasked with housing, we wanted to get feedback through this body first. We would anticipate bringing forward a ordinance for the council's consideration in the first quarter of 2024. The draft ordinance that's in your packet has been modeled after the city of Minnetonka, who has adopted a trust fund. And the other thing I wanted to note is, and we allude to it in the staff report, is we think that this might be a good opportunity, at least in 2024, to pursue an updated housing study. We think the results of such a study could offer more specifics about what sort of programs or activities the local housing trust fund might want to support. That funds are limited, and we want to make sure we're expending them in the most meaningful, impactful way in our community. And so in 2024, we think that it might be a good time to do that study so that we have a greater nexus between the programs that we might want to fund with the sales tax money that we're putting in our trust fund, assuming, of course, the council moves forward with it. So the draft ordinance that is in your packet has been drafted by our city attorney. She's here to help answer any questions, as am I. So with that, I'm just going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gunlock. Are there questions from the members of the EDA board related to this proposed Affordable Housing Trust or Housing Trust, Local Housing Trust, I'll get the name right, as outlined? Member Atten.
I have a little wording question, if we could, please, on line 87. Here in that section, under affordability requirements, section B, there's a 1 and a 2. 1 talks about persons of moderate, low, or very low income, but 2 speaks only of moderate and low, but not very low. Was that intentionally left out, or is that just something we should throw in, very low?
I honestly don't know offhand. We can look into it.
Okay.
Why very low was left off?
It seems to be used in several other spots, including the next section too,
Yeah.
but I didn't know if there was an intention to that.
I could imagine that it might be related to limitations in state law, how the funds could be used or something like that. But we have our attorney here with us.
I'm sorry, shall we? It's not showing it the same way. Scroll down where it's under the affordability requirements.
Oh, okay.
These two numbers, we left off very low on number 2. I don't know if that was strategic. We'll have to,
Okay, that's fine.
Take
We
a
don't,
look at
yeah,
it.
we're not passing tonight, that's fine. You
exactly.
can look into it. Thank you.
It seems that 1 talks about a lot of different types of projects, and 2 specifically only talks about development and rehabilitation projects. And so, once again, that's why I was thinking there may be certain limitations in the state law or elsewhere as to how it has to be done. But obviously, that's something we can research and come back with.
And obviously, and I alluded to this in the report, the city's been fairly successful at creating affordable housing in the community, but the area where we are continuing to struggle is the very low income, which is why we really should take a look at that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. The next section says projects will be prioritized to provide affordable housing to persons of low and very low income. So it would seem that, but I just want to make sure we're checking. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for staff? And I just did want to clarify too, you alluded to the sales tax funding. This is not a local sales tax, this is a state sales tax that was passed in the last legislative session that applies to a number of municipalities, if not the whole state, I'm not 100% sure. But regardless, there's a formula by which it's allocated, and the city's expected allocation, at least next year, it's about $400,000 from that fund.
That's right.
Right. And so, the suggestion being is that since that should be used for housing, and since we don't have a place necessarily to put it, it might otherwise end up, say, in our general fund or somewhere else, where it might be harder to track it. And so this idea is to set this up so this and other sources of funding are dedicated to housing purposes.
That's right.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, once again, we'll check with the members of the public to see if anyone in the public wishes to comment on this. And once again, this is an item whereby the EDA is providing feedback to staff as to this ordinance. We're not adopting it this evening. We haven't done any of the notice that's required under state law to adopt this ordinance, and so that will have to happen by the city council at a subsequent date. So certainly there will be another opportunity for input at that time if folks aren't prepared to provide input at this time. Is there anyone from the public who does wish to speak to this item at this time? All right. Seeing that there's no one, we'll close the opportunity for public comment. And is this something that the EDA would like to see staff bring forward to the council at a future date for council consideration?
Yes.
Yes.
Seems to be confirmed, no objection. The only thing I will note to staff is that I believe you will have to change the chapter or section number because later in the meeting, we have an item to adopt a Chapter 911 already for the reasonable accommodation ordinance, and we can't have two chapters with the same number, so.
Good catch.
You're so good at that, Mayor.
Well, sometimes I catch these things. With that, then, the remaining business item for the Economic Development Authority this evening is to consider 2024 meeting dates. I imagine Ms. Kelsey is here for that item, although Mr. Trudgeon can probably help out as well. We've got the proposed list of dates, and I'll turn it over to whomever wants to go through it with us.
Well, part of your requirement is on your last meeting of every year, you need to adopt your following year's meeting dates as part of your bylaws and requirements. So for your consideration, we have scheduled them to align with the city council meetings. And as you note, January, March, May, July, September, and November. You might note that the March one is being scheduled around the spring break period, just because staff will be gone. So we really can't conduct any business unless you have us probably to help you out. So just, that's kind of why that one is falling along that date.
Fine.
Got it. That probably works for us, too.
Okay.
Questions from the members of the EDA board on the proposed schedule? All right, is there a motion to, this is our last meeting of the year, so we do have to adapt. Now, is there a motion to adopt that schedule?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Member Strawn, seconded by Member Etten. Sorry, this side of the table. Any discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We've got our EDA meeting scheduled for 2024. Thank you. And of course, we can always schedule special meetings or cancel meetings as the course of the year goes on, but we do have to adopt our basic schedule. All right, with that then, is there a motion to adjourn the EDA meeting with no further business pending?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Schroeder, seconded by Member Etten. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We are adjourned from the EDA meeting at approximately 6:28 p.m. And we'll convene the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, November 6th, 2023, after a brief
Thanks,
moment to reset the chambers here.